Hey there, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for Weather Extra. Meteorologist Jillian Johnson. Before we get into the past week's top weather stories, something that happens every 4 years is happening this upcoming week. This year, 2024, is a leap year, so we have an extra day in the month of February. And it happens to be this upcoming Thursday. For more on the science behind leap years, we bring in meteorologist Sean Bellafury, who kicks off Weather Extra for us. Sean.
2024 is another one of those magical years, the leap year, where we add on an extra day in February 29th. But you may be wondering why exactly we keep doing that every 4 years. Now, unlike the time change, which in my opinion is kind of silly, this actually serves a very important purpose, and get ready for a lot of numbers being thrown at you. 1 year is equal to the time it takes for one revolution around the sun, as you end up right back in the exact same point that you started out a year ago. You think that's 365 days, but it actually isn't. It's 365.2422 days, so a year is actually a little bit longer than 365 days. So that extra rough quarter year or quarter of a day that we have every year turns out to be approximately 5.8 hours that we miss year after year. So we have to kind of add that back. Now, if we didn't have a leap day, over the course of 100 years, our calendar would be off by 24 days. So instead of March 19th being the first day of spring like it is this year, it would actually be February 23rd. And those differences just keep compounding and compounding and compounding. So how do we fix that? Well, since we have an extra quarter of a day every single year, we add 1 day every 4 years. So that makes the yearly average 365.25 days. The problem solved, right? Actually, no. We are overestimating a little bit. So if we just added 1 day every 4 years, that means we would have 11.2 minutes longer than we should every single year. That means in 100 years, our calendar would be roughly around 18 hours off, which doesn't sound like too much, but it's still a little bit too much. So how do we fix that problem? We kind of play this hopscotch. Every single time we have a leap year, if it is a start of the century, we actually skip that leap year unless the year is divisible by 400. So that makes the new yearly average 365.2425 days, which is a lot closer to what we should be. We actually would only end up with a 0.0003 day surplus. That means that we would be off 25.9 seconds too much each year, and at that rate it would be 3,333 years to be 1 day off. Reporting in the studio, Sean Bellafury, KWTX News 10.
We are now under 45 days until a total solar eclipse moves right through central Texas on Monday, April 8th. Thousands are now preparing for the eclipse, and it's important to prepare to witness it safely, protecting your eyes. News 10's Isabella Quintanilla talked to a couple of experts on how to stay safe. Here's what they had to say.
When the eclipse is happening, we want to see the moon, the disk of the moon actually covering part of the sun. And therefore you would need to look directly into the sun.
While we're all excited to watch the total solar eclipse, making sure to protect your eyes is essential.
Too much ultraviolet in our eyes will actually damage the detectors, the cones that will allow us to see, and they will burn it.
Once that part of your eye is burned from the sun's rays, there is no reversing that damage.
The rods and cones and the retina do not regenerate, so you can get a permanent loss of vision and just a central gap in your vision. If that happens, it can get a little bit better with time because there's some surrounding edema, and the edema will resolve, but the cells that were damaged are permanent. We don't have any way to fix that.
You can watch the eclipse with special glasses that block out the ultraviolet waves, but they're not always 100% effective. One way to make sure your eclipse glasses will actually protect your eyes is to check for ISO 12312-2, which means that it is intended for direct viewing of the sun. However, Dr. Eshba says that even if you have eclipse glasses, you should avoid looking directly at the sun.
There are documented cases of fakes out there on the internet. So again, even if you buy something online that should be safe, you don't know if it's really safe or not.
But according to NASA, for those 4 minutes of totality, you will be able to safely watch the eclipse.
When the moon fully covers the sun, then it's safe for us to look directly into the sun. And it's beautiful. Then you can see the corona and the solar winds. It is an amazing, amazing phenomenon.
The top weather story of the past week has been the pounding rain that's drenched the state of California. Again, the flooding rain and heavy snow along with damaging winds and high waves were all brought to the Golden State by numerous atmospheric river events. There wasn't a city across the state that didn't see impacts from these events over the past few weeks. Residents along the West Coast all left with a huge mess to clean up. With a look back at the past week of the weather in California, we turn to CBS's Jared Hill.
In California, another night of rain. This latest atmospheric river bringing high surf and beach erosion, turning crosswalks into canals, and sending water rushing through neighborhoods.
What's typically happened over the last year is unprecedented.
Less than 10 years ago, the land in coastal Rancho Palos Verdes barely moved. Now the community has seen the ground shift up to 10 feet in 1 year, threatening nearly 400 homes. Los Angeles is now on pace to break a February record. North of Sacramento, the saturated soil no match for this massive tree that crashed through Jacqueline Ellis's home.
I'm just trying to pick up the pieces and see what I have left.
Elsewhere in the state, in a dramatic rescue, 2 people trapped in floodwaters lifted to safety. The storms have impacted almost every part of the Golden State. Potholes riddle LA streets after the city saw nearly 10 inches of rain this month.
It's surprising to me how hard it is for them to keep up with it.
And in California's highest peaks, the storm is bringing some welcome snow for skiers, while this bald eagle in the San Bernardino Mountains keeps eggs warm from the winter weather.
Over the past year, California has been inundated with round after round of heavy, but all the rain has been good for the state's drought conditions. The year 2023 started with 100% of California under some form of drought. And after the historically wet year they went through last year, they ended 2023 with 97% of the state drought-free. As you just saw, California has seen additional rounds of heavy but beneficial rainfall so far this year, keeping majority of the state drought-free, as you can see right here behind me. In the latest update from this past Thursday, only 7% of the state is currently abnormally dry, which is this yellow color right here behind me. Abnormally dry is the lowest drought intensity possible. So that means 93% of the state is still drought free. And now you may be wondering how the state is storing all that extra rainwater. For more on how water management in Sacramento is handling the surplus of water, here's Tori Apodaca.
Heavy rain and heavy snow coming down on California. So how is the state storing all this water? One solution, recharging our groundwater.
You stop pumping groundwater and you allow the basin to fill up naturally.
Water expert Ryan Ojakian with the Regional Water Authority says you use more surface water when it's wet and more groundwater when it's dry. That's what the Sacramento Regional Water Bank has been doing, and it's seeing results.
And if you look at Department of Water Resources data, you'll see that our groundwater table as a result has been increasing.
This is natural green infrastructure that exists under our feet, and we're just not utilizing it enough yet.
The Department of Water Resources says reservoir storage can complement recharging the groundwater. That's why the state is still working to complete its Sites Reservoir project that will divert water from the Sac River during high flow periods into storage.
That you can capture the water when it's there, hold it in your storage impoundment, and then release it to then be metered into the groundwater basin at a slower rate and allow you to capture overall a greater amount of water for uses in those dry years.
Between last year's record wet season and what we are seeing this year, Sites Reservoir would be sitting at about 80% full today had the project been completed. And in nearby Roseville, another storage system is at work through aquifer storage, wells pumping water in and out of groundwater basin. Water catching infrastructure envisioned a century ago, evolving to the changing climate conditions in California.
And before we head to break, take a look at this. A water spout was seen moving over southern Florida early last week, blowing debris into the air as it made landfall. The local National Weather Service confirmed the tornado located in the lower Florida Keys. No injuries were reported, but authorities said one structure did suffer some damage. Well, coming up after the break, we take a look at some of the top headlines from outer space. We have much more to come on Weather Extra. Stick with us. Welcome back to Weather Extra. A U.S.-made spacecraft landed on the moon in an unmanned mission this past Thursday night. It's the first lunar landing of a U.S.-made spacecraft in more than 5 decades. Jen Sullivan has a look back at this historic moment.
We can confirm, without a doubt, as our equipment is on the surface of the moon.
An historic moment in lunar exploration, a U.S.-made spacecraft landing on the moon for the first time in more than 50 years.
Welcome to the moon.
I'm very excited about this.
Right there.
The last time the U.S. landed on the moon was the Apollo 17 mission in 1972.
This is quite an emotional feeling to be here.
That's the CEO of Intuitive Machines, talking before the launch. He's the head of the company that created this robotic explorer, named Odysseus. It's the first time a private company has landed a craft on the moon.
This is a small little company trying to do something that is very bold.
Odysseus is about the size of a phone booth. No crew members were on board. It landed Thursday night on the moon's south pole. None of the Apollo missions have landed in that area. The reason behind this was to explore that part of the moon and see if there's water in the form of ice before NASA sends a crewed mission there in late 2026. NASA paid the company $118 million for this mission. This will have a major impact on future exploration.
We've been going to the moon for a while, and we need to continue to.
The spacecraft left Earth February 14th. Traveling roughly 620,000 miles to get to the moon. Other private companies have attempted to complete this mission, but none of them landed on the moon until Thursday night, making this a giant leap for further moon exploration. I'm Jen Sullivan reporting.
In other space news this week, the European Space Agency's satellite named ERS-2 re-entered into Earth's atmosphere this past Wednesday morning after more than a decade-long mission. The 5,000-pound satellite broke up and burned as it moved through the atmosphere. The European Space Agency, or ESA, received confirmation of the satellite's atmospheric re-entry just before noon Central Time Wednesday, making re-entry over the North Pacific Ocean between Alaska and Hawaii. ERS-2 launched in 1995 and was initially planned to serve the ESA for 3 years. However, it remained in operation until 2011, providing data for over 5,000 projects, including tracking Earth's shrinking polar ice, sea levels, and atmospheric makeup, along with observing natural disasters in remote areas. But now some scientists are getting a little worried about the levels of space pollution. A new study from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration says up to 10% of particles in the upper atmosphere now contain bits of metal. That vaporized metal comes from rockets or satellites falling out of orbit and burning up. The report predicts that in the coming decades, man-made debris will make up 50% of stratospheric aerosols. Now, with tens of thousands of satellites predicted to launch in coming years, scientists are concerned about how they will affect the ozone layer and the Earth's climate. In addition, astronomers worry the growing light pollution may soon prevent the study of other galaxies with terrestrial telescopes. Late last fall, a group of 36 students, faculty, and staff from Texas A&M spent 2 weeks in Antarctica on a study abroad trip. And coming up next on Weather Extra, Brady Taylor talks with an oceanography professor about the trip and the research that was done in this week's Degrees of Science. Their conversation is coming up on the other side of this break.
Welcome in this week's Degrees of Science. Back in late fall, Texas A&M sent a group of 36 mix of students, staff, and faculty for the first time to Antarctica for a study abroad trip. And we're talking today with one of the faculty members, Dr. Chrissy Wiederwald, who was an oceanography professor at A&M that went on the trip to Antarctica. So, Chrissy, how cool was this trip that y'all got to take down to Antarctica?
No pun intended, it was very cool. This was not my first time to Antarctica. My research background is actually in Antarctic physical oceanography, but the fact that I got to share this experience with 36 people was really amazing. It was probably one of the most breathtaking places you could ever visit.
So you say you've done research down there. Now, this group was very diverse with a whole different people in different disciplines. How much fun did it make it having people studying a whole lot of different things while they were down there in Antarctica?
Yeah, it was a really cool perspective from, you know, being a scientist to having educational psychology students and recreation, parks and tourism students. We also had meteorology students, which you're probably really familiar with. And it was really great to kind of have that social science perspective to things. The educational psychology students were doing really cool research projects on penguin behavior and human behaviors in that remote environment. So it was really cool to kind of see this mixing of disciplines come together with kind of one common location and common goal, and just kind of, you know, really learning more about that pristine environment that's in Antarctica.
As a professor being there with students, how fun was it to watch some of your students be able to do some of that research in the field like that?
I absolutely loved it. I think one of the things that I love the most about my job is seeing students have that kind of light bulb aha moment where they're connecting what they learned in the classroom to what they're seeing in the environment. And I think it was even cooler to see some of the students who are not my oceanography students start to want to get involved with their sample collection. And, you know, at one point in time, I think on our last trip to collect samples, or our last Zodiac ride to collect samples, I had a wait list of students wanting to help. And that was amazing to see, even the non-oceanography students getting really into it and really understanding the science.
Did y'all have a lot of that where people were moving between the disciplines? I know I saw some of the pictures of, you know, seeing penguins in the wild, and some people it's the first time they've ever seen that. Did they get to help out and kind of be involved in different stuff?
Yeah, I was willing to have anybody help who wanted to help. So, you know, it's kind of mandatory for my oceanography students to help us collect samples. But any of the other students, if they were wanting to learn, I think that's one of the most important things that we can do as a professor, is be able to communicate our science and let, you know, everyone, general public, other scientists, understand the importance of the work that we do.
So you said you've taken a couple trips to Antarctica. Well, for people that have never been, can you explain just how cool it is down there and how different it is down at that part of the world?
Yeah, it's really hard to describe because it's just this white, icy, snowy environment. And, you know, we go down in the summertime, or their summer. So it's not as cold as what people would think. I've never done what they call winter over, which is you stay, you know, through the winter down there when it's complete darkness. But even having almost 24 hours of daylight is just this very surreal feeling. Being able to like set foot on or in our US base stations that are down on the Antarctic continent and just see kind of these operational hubs of science is just a really cool, it's a really cool experience to have.
What was it like seeing the students' reaction when they got down there and kind of probably in awe seeing all that?
It was amazing, although they probably saw me making the same expressions because, you know, when we're doing research, we're stepping on the continent for just a little bit, and then we're getting on a research vessel and we're offshore for 60 days. And so without, you know, with the occasional sighting of an iceberg or a penguin, we didn't have the experience that we had with these students. We were getting to go ashore and, you know, watch penguins in their natural habitat, or seeing seals, especially the little baby pup seals that were just trying to figure out that they could swim or, you know, stick their head underwater. It was really cool to watch the students just absorb all of that. And they did. They really just stood there and absorbed all of it.
To hear more about the work that was done on this research trip, scan the QR code right there on your screen to watch on YouTube, or you can go to KWTX.com/degrees of science. Weather Extra will be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. The takeaway cup that fuels our mornings is getting a fresh look. In Denmark, one city is looking at replacing those disposable paper cups with ones that can be reused. In a first-of-its-kind program, officials hope by paying a deposit up front, they can tackle single-use waste. CBS's Ian Lee has more.
Many folks start their day here, getting a cup of joe on the go. And when they're done, that paper cup ends up in the trash. One Danish city hopes to change that morning routine.
When you buy your coffee, you get the possibility to buy a reusable cup, and when you have drinking your coffee, you can leave it in one of the deposit boxes and get your money back.
For a deposit of 5 kroner, or roughly 75 cents, customers get their latte, cappuccino, or fancy concoction in a reusable cup.
You drink your coffee, you take your smartphone or your credit card, you do like this, and then you just put the cup in. And just like that, you get 5 crowns transferred to your bank account.
The cups then travel to a facility where they're cleaned and inspected for damage, but it comes at a cost.
We need to scale this up in order to make this a financially viable solution.
Officials hope the magnificent idea cuts back on waste. 50% of the city's trash comes from takeaway items.
And all this stuff ends out in the nature. We get the microplastic, we get cups all over the place. Saturday morning, the city looks like trash.
If successful, they hope to widen the program.
Basically, this can be expanded to all kind of takeaway. This can be the pizza box, this can be the box you have your curry in.
Finding that perfect blend of tackling trash, going green, and creating a cleaner community. Ian Lee, CBS News.
Now, according to industry experts, coffee is the second most widely consumed beverage in the U.S. after water, with Americans drinking 400 million cups of coffee every single day. Well, that's all we have for you on this week's episode of Weather Extra. Tune in again next weekend for another half hour of weather and science. Have a great week.